Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Blue is the New White podcast. Today I get to sit down with another great ambassador for kick-ass careers. In fact, her 7-year-old daughter is also an ambassador for kick-ass careers. Courtney Chard is a UA Local 46 steamfitter and welder. In her spare time, she puts her skills to use in an unconventional way by sculpting art from scrap metal. So definitely make sure you head over to her Instagram page after the show or during the show or right now to see her creations. Truly inspiring and truly remarkable. Courtney went the typical route growing up, going to college and veering from the trades because she was a woman. When she decided she wouldn't accept being stuck in a career she didn't enjoy, she made a change. She went to night school for welding and blueprints and eventually landed in the UA. That came with its own set of challenges, of course, but she never wavered from her objective, to pursue a career that made her happy and fulfilled. Courtney shares so many inspiring stories about mentorship, helping people, and all of the great opportunities she had in the trades to grow as a person. As for her definition of success, to be happy and joyful, but never, ever content. As always, this show's not monetized and we don't run ads. We rely strictly on the word of mouth from our listeners to further the mission. So, if you enjoy this episode, please take a second to rate it, review it, and share it. The future generations of tradespeople depend on it. They depend on you. So thank you again and enjoy this episode of the Blue is the New White podcast with Courtney Chard. Courtney, welcome to the Blue is the New White podcast. So happy that you could join me here today.
Thank you, Josh. I'm glad to be here.
I'm super excited to talk to you. I got a chance to check out all of the art that you have on your Instagram, the metal art, and we're going to get all into that today too. But really, truly remarkable what you can do with that welder. So as a kind of a lead into that, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and kind of tell us how you got to where you are today, who you are, and all that good stuff.
Okay, well, I'm a second generation pipe welder with UA Local 46 Toronto. My father was a pipeline welder. I started my apprenticeship as a steamfitter, and then I did a second apprenticeship side by side and got my welding. I kind of think that I was just I honestly think I was born into it. I really do. It's in my blood, and there's a picture of me in my shop when I was about 3 years old in the shop with my father, and I always seem to think like that was like my destiny right there in that picture. So I was born into a very supportive family. Considering my parents' age and the generation, they weren't, women can't do this, women can't do that, which is kind of remarkable because that generation tends to have those points of views. And my father was pretty open-minded about women being in the trades and women could do anything. I always kind of had a little bend to me where I was a bit of a tomboy, liked to play hockey, dirt bike, liked shorter hair, like dress like the boys kind of thing. And then I went to college for law and security and I hated it. But I just kind of picked something because that's what you're supposed to do. You graduate high school and you're supposed to go to college, and the trades weren't an option. Like they just weren't. And I knew I wanted to do something different always. So I did the 2-year program because I didn't want to be a college dropout. So I completed the program, but I was just miserable. And then after that, I finally got enough courage to ask my father, I want to learn how to weld. I want to get in construction. And he just said, okay, get in the shop. And then that's kind of how it started. So then I was still working, but I was taking night school courses at the local college to learn how to weld and blueprint reading. And that actually helped me when I joined the union, because when you sign up for your apprenticeship, that was all kind of like points for me. And I didn't, in trade school, because I already knew how to weld, I didn't have to repeat the welding, and it helped me out. So that's a bit of my background and how I started.
Oh, very cool. So I'm curious. I want to try to kind of do this in a little timeline format here. So you knew from a really young age that you liked the trades, you liked the welding, and you showed a sincere interest in what your dad did. Yeah.
I don't know if it was as conscious as that.
Okay.
I think reflecting back on it, I can see it in my upbringing. But remember, I'm 42. So when I was younger, again, the trades weren't an option. Like it wasn't something that, at least not in any of my school experience or education, it wasn't like an option. We had shop and home ec, but they weren't pushed like you could be this for women as careers. My upbringing definitely affected me because my father loved his job, loved his career, very proud of it. It was talk around the dinner table. He also had his shop. So just growing up in that environment, I had obviously an interest in it, but I don't think it was as conscious as that at that age. Me looking back now, I could see it was the perfect recipe for me to be interested in it and get into it, though. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That definitely makes sense, and it's funny, you know, that you can look back now and kind of make that association, but maybe at that age you knew it was interesting, but never really considered it as an option.
Right. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I remember how scared I was to ask my father to be in the trades because it was so unusual. I didn't know any trade women. I never, like, it wasn't something that existed, you know, like it wasn't like I ever heard at those conversations on the dinner table that he was working with a woman. Like, so I was very intimidated to kind of go that way.
So as you started to get older and start considering career paths, say like middle school, high school, you know, that kind of age, did this kind of start weighing on you a little bit more? Is this something that, you know, conscious back then, you kind of were like, I wish I could go this route, but I can't, so I'll do this? Not
at all. It was not even in my mind that it was an option because I didn't know it was an option. And I honestly can say it was when I was 20, 21 is when I started to want to go that way. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. Because it's funny because in the union, everyone's like, oh, Courtney's been welding since she's like 5 years old. And I'm like, no, I didn't start welding at 5, you know? I started in my early 20s. So.
Wow, that's interesting. So I'm curious. I mean, obviously, I mean, it sounds like you kind of heard the common narrative through high school, right? Which is you have to go to college, you have to get this degree, you know, and you know, then you'll have your career kind of set for you. So what made you choose law and security?
I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And
so literally it was like going down a sheet of paper and was like, oh, I'll pick that one.
Right. I thought, oh, maybe it'd be interesting. Maybe I could be a police officer, like, you know, but I knew, I think almost immediately this was not what I want to do at all. But I still stuck at it for 2 years because that's what you're supposed to do.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad that times have changed since then. At least they're changing. You know, that narrative, obviously, it still exists. And that's kind of what this whole show revolves around. That's what my book revolves around, and just trying to kind of break people out of that mindset that, you know, that path is a necessary path because, you know, I talk a lot about success and, you know, how we need to let people define what success is to them and then put them on a path to get them there, you know, and whether that includes college or it doesn't, you know, I've got nothing against college in particular. What I often say is I have nothing against college, right? But I have something against the ROI that a college education typically returns, which doesn't always match what's put into it. So that's interesting. So 2 years of that, and then you got out of college, you completed that. At what point did something click in you where you were able to go to your dad then and say, I don't want to do what I went to college for. I want to do this?
I think it was honestly a fear of being a failure. So I knew, and again, it's looking back now. I don't know if it was as conscious or if I could put it into words at that age that I can now, but I can. So I knew my father and mother were fairly successful. I knew how I was raised. I knew the things that they provided for me. I wanted that life. And I thought, how am I going to provide that for myself? At the time I was, still going to college and then waitressing, while I was doing that part-time. And I'm like, I have to pick a career that I like, but I also have to pick a career that's going to provide me with a lifestyle that I was raised and used to and want to maintain this lifestyle. Like, I was terrified I was, going to be stuck in a dead-end job. And I didn't want that. So, I mean, there's nothing against, people who do work in the restaurant business or any of that, but I wanted a certain lifestyle and I wanted the finances to be able to maintain that. And so I knew I always wanted to do something different. And I knew that because of my upbringing, and my dad loved his job and it was always interesting. And I thought, you know what, this is the way that I'm going to be able to be successful and have the things that I want to have in life and provide for myself and my family.
Very cool. So at that time, you said you were 20, 21, something like that when you made that decision. At that time, I would imagine it was still uncommon for a woman to enter into the trades, right?
Very, very uncommon.
Okay.
I think I was the first welder in 46 for a long time.
Cool.
Now that's not the case. That's wonderful. But for a long time, I was the first welder. Yes.
That's got to come with it, its own sense of pride and accomplishment.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't really think of it like that. I guess it's my job, and I don't know.
No, and that's great, and that's great, and it's the more important thing is that it was something that you liked to do, and that you were good at it, and ultimately successful with it. But I think that there's a lot to be said about being a trailblazer, in a sense, for that specific area and that specific time frame. Obviously, it may not have been something you were conscious of at the time. You were too focused on trying to be good at what you were doing and learn as much as you could, but still very impressive. So what was that?
Thank you.
What was that journey like when you started, like when you took that step and you said, okay, this is what I want to do, and this is what I decided to do. Let's say, after you got done with your classes, your night classes for welding and blueprint, and you started to really dive deeper into the workforce. What did that look like?
It was scary. A lot of things came up. It was hard. It was. You had to be tough. So I was a steamfitter apprentice. And a lot of times at first I don't think they do this now anymore, but in our local, if you're female and you want to get in the trade, they always say you should be a plumber because it's lighter work. It's not as heavy, which is completely ridiculous thinking because I always see the plumbers slug the most, because if you're a steamfitter, you're usually working with really heavy stuff, and it's so heavy that not even the guys can lift it. So then you have equipment, so chain falls and forklifts and stuff like that, jacks to lift the material. So none of the fitters wanted me on their crew, so I ended up being put on a plumbing crew as a steamfitter apprentice because they didn't want you on their crew. So it was interesting. It was lonely. In trade school, lots of people didn't want to be my shop partner. But then after a while, like, people just kind of get used to you because you're not going to go away. So then, it's like, oh, if you can't beat or join her kind of thing. And then but I proved myself and people got used to me and, knew I was there for the right reasons, and it turned out to be good. But at first it was very, very difficult. Yeah.
Sure. So what did that,
go
ahead.
I was going to say it's probably a maturity thing too, because as I matured and as I learned how to handle different situations, it got easier too. So, you're very young when you, like, at that age, 20, 21, 22, that's young.
Oh yeah.
And it's definitely a learning curve, right? On how to handle yourself. And again, I didn't have anyone there to ask any questions to, or there was no one there kind of ahead of you to follow, right?
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, I talk a lot about the benefits that the skilled trades provide above and beyond, monetary benefits and stuff like that. But the values that it teaches you, what you learn about yourself when you enter into the trades. I remember when I first got into the trades, my background is in commercial kitchen equipment. That was my specialty. And before that, I had no idea, I didn't know anything about the trades, barely turned a wrench. The most I did was take apart my Rock'em Sock'em robots at Christmas and piss my parents off, entirely. But once I actually got into the trades, and again, kind of like you said, not a conscious thing at the time, right? It's hard, I should say, when you're in those circumstances to stop and say, well, fundamentally, this is building on value X, and this is enhancing my personality here and shaping who I am as a person there. But it really is, right? When you look back. One of the things that I'm curious is, what do you feel that taught you, having to go through kind of those challenges that you just laid out?
I don't exclude people now. So people say, oh, you're nice to everyone, or, yeah, because I know what it's like for someone not to be nice to you. Like, really, like, sometimes at, trade school, I was like sitting by myself having my lunch, or, so I really try to be inclusive to everyone. And yeah, because the trade can be like, if you don't fit in, and I'm not talking about just male or female, males, like if you don't fit in as a male, they can be brutal. They'll eat you alive, right?
Yeah.
So I think I've really become conscious of that, and not to like dismiss anyone or make them feel out of place, I guess. Because we spend a lot of time at work, and no one goes to work wanting to be miserable.
Oh, that is true. It's true. Well, oftentimes we spend more time at work than we do really anywhere else, except maybe sleeping, but maybe not even that.
Right.
Yeah, and I get that. I think that's the first time I've gotten that answer on this show. I mean, essentially what you're saying is it helped you be more compassionate, right? With others and what they may be going through and the struggles, male or female, right? Because like you said, that aspect of the trades, if you don't fit in, or at least typically if you don't fit in, if you haven't, then yeah, it can be brutal. Because I think there's a lot of pride that comes with it, right? And a lot of people don't know how to handle that pride. Pride is a great thing if you know how to use it. I know a lot of great people that take a lot of pride in their work, but it's the ones that take too much pride, I think, in their territory that, kind of get it a little bit confused. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And then you also see, like, a lot of apprentices will come in at 18 because you don't have to do the extra year in high school. So they're coming in really young. And a lot of these young men are, they've never lifted anything before, right? And they're small, and the guys can be brutal, not just towards women, but just towards each other. So yeah. And I don't know if it's that sometimes you get the old school mentality where you think to teach someone, you got to yell at them. I've seen that too. It's like, but so that's what's made me changed my behavior, and it's made me more empathetic. Is that the word? I don't know.
That's a great word for it, because you're absolutely right. Compassion, empathy, that those are definitely good words for to describe what you've learned. I imagine there's also an aspect of tenacity to it too, just true grit, and not, how else can I say this, having thick skin. You weren't going to stop, right? And that's
no. And being like, so I knew I was breaking the mold. Like I knew I was somewhat of a, I'm going to set some sort of precedent. And I took that seriously. I did know that. And I knew going into the trades, I knew, being the age I was, just the times it was, I knew that what came with it. So I knew I knew what I was going to face. And I understood that was a part of it. And some women I talk to, they can't seem to kind of let that go. Like, oh, this happened to me and that happened to me, and I'm so bitter and I'm so upset. And yes, it is absolutely wrong, 100%. But someone had to go through it. And my generation of tradeswomen were the women that had to go through it to make it easier and better for the women after us. And they'll hopefully go through a little bit less. And then the next generation, it keeps continuing. And a lot of times I think people want answers and solutions right away. And sometimes, and I always tell people this, I don't know what the answer and solution is, but I do know it just takes time. And some things just take time. So you're planting the seed, you're waiting for it to grow, and it takes time. And then the attitudes will change. And it starts out by me and my generation starting in the trade, and then me having a young apprentice, a young male apprentice. And that male apprentice works with me as a journeyman. And then he is taught by me, and he is now my friend. And now this male apprentice has become a foreman. And 15 years later, after the fact, he texts me and says, "Thank you, Courtney. Because of you, I am who I am today." So that foreman now will be the one who hires another female and then teaches her. Or he's the one who's going to have a daughter and says, go into the trade, or whatever the situation is. So yeah, I knew going in I was going to face all those things. I knew I was going to get, probably people doing things that they shouldn't and saying things that they shouldn't. And I knew that was a part of it. And I knew that was the deal, and yes, it's wrong and all this, and it's, but no, that's the deal. Because that's, sorry.
That's okay.
I don't know what's going on. So that's definitely the deal there.
Yeah, that's amazing and so true. I mean, I got goosebumps like twice during that story, by the way. But no, it was but you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a lot of things that aren't right, and it takes people, time and effort to change it. And it's like that saying, right? Be the change that you want to see. And it holds true, because it's a matter of consistency, determination, and knowing that what you're doing is not only great for you, but great for future generations of tradespeople, both men and women. I mean, we talk all the time about closing the skilled trades gap. I mean, that's a huge mission of mine, is to help and aid in closing the skilled trades gap everywhere. And, that's why I love talking to women, in the trades, because even today exists a stereotype that, it's man's work, which obviously you're working to change. Kick-Ass Careers is working to change. I'm working to change, because why are we going to sit here and complain about how there's no skilled workers when we're disregarding 50% of the world's population? I mean, it doesn't make sense. And man, I'll tell you, I've seen some women that could work circles around some of the tradesmen that I know, and that's just the truth, but you're right. And it does take time. And I think that's a very, very important lesson and some really great advice for anybody that's listening. I have to ask, that male apprentice, was that a true story? Is that?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. And it just happened recently that he had sent me that text message. And I remember being shocked, because you don't ever realize, or you don't know how you're going to affect somebody. And I had no idea he was paying attention, because, to be quite honest, when he came into the trade, you're like, are you listening to me? And because he was very young, and yeah, I guess he was listening. Awesome. It almost made me cry, because it was just like, it was a really good gift he gave me to acknowledge that I had something to do with, where he is.
Yeah.
Now.
I was just going to ask what feeling came over you when you got that text message, or was it a text message you said, or a phone call?
It was text. Yes.
I mean, that had to be, there's very few things that compare to that, right? I mean, you had to, can you describe the emotion that you felt?
I was just, it was so positive. And I think it was at a time where I almost needed to hear that message. And it was just like, yeah, I just was really happy that I could have such a good effect on people. Because you at least hear, like, people, I always make this is another thing. I make a point to tell people, if someone says something good about someone, I'll say it to them. I'll say, this guy said this about you. Because you always hear negative things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to hear that, and I think too, like, because so much time had passed, and he still acknowledged it and remembered it and wanted to tell me that. So that was really special, Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I think that, that's an important point to get across, because the trades they're so much more than just turning the wrenches. You have these types of opportunities to inspire real change in people's lives and help them develop throughout their career, personally and professionally. And, I try to reach, high school students before they make a decision on whether or not they're going to go to college, and just try to talk to them about this type of route. And I'm always looking for different avenues and ways that, we can describe the sense of satisfaction and accomplishment and the reward that comes along with this industry. And I think that that's a perfect example, because it just, there's only so many ways that somebody can invoke that type of response from somebody else. And I mean, it sounds like you truly, helped this person, just develop into what they are today, which is just absolutely remarkable.
It was pretty epic. Another thing too about the trade, and I like this, is we get to work with all different age groups. And because of how the trade is, and it's like a brotherhood or sisterhood, it's a fraternity, you have all different age groups and generations that then become friends because you work so closely to each other. So that's something nice too. And then something else happened. Was it last week? There's a black sheet metal worker. His name's Peter. And he pulled me aside, and I think we joke, like, because he's the only black man in plan, and then I'm the only girl in plan kind of thing, but not really, but it seems that way. So we were just joking. And he goes, you know what, Courtney, we were talking about this at lunch, and he was wondering who had it harder, whether a person of color had it harder or a woman had it harder in the trade. So we kind of briefly touched on that. We didn't know who had it harder, I think, in the end. But it was interesting that he acknowledged that, we both faced challenges. His because of the color of his skin, and mine because the sex that I am. So it was interesting. And I told him a story. I was on pipeline, and on pipeline you get partnered up with it's two welders, like teams, right? And we had tested, and we're in the yard, and everyone's like, okay, we're going to pick who's going in the shacks together. And it was me and another welder who was black. And I was looking at him, and he was looking at me, and we were looking at each other across the yard. And we knew that we were going to be teamed up because nobody wanted to work with a woman and nobody wanted to work with a black guy. And sure enough, he and I were partnered up, and we did so well. We killed it because he was a good person anyways, but we just really worked together, and we knew we had to, and we did. And we did a really good job. So sorry, I digressed on you.
No, that's
I kind of went off, but
that's an awesome story.
Yeah.
And it's right to my point, and I think that's great. And honestly, it's hard today, my personality, your personality, it's hard to see why that would ever be an issue, right? Just because the trades is so objective oriented. Like if you can do the job, if you can get it done, not much else should really matter. You know what I mean?
No. And you know what? And we were talking about this a bit earlier. I've seen such a change, like such a change. I got in the trade in 2002, and oh yeah, like the last 5 years, easily such a big change for the better. It's amazing. Yeah.
That's really great. So it's really been in the last 5 years that you've seen like the most change in within the industry.
I would say so, but it's happened quick, like really quickly. And yeah, I don't know what's triggered that, but yeah, it's really happened quickly. And the last 5 years, I can really see a change, especially and even amongst the women in the collective. It seems like women are more supportive of each other too. Because for a while there, it seemed like, the women were jealous of each other or saw each other as competition, but now we see each other as allies. And I really see a good change.
That's an interesting dynamic, I think. I can understand it now that you're saying it. Like I get it, but it's nothing that I ever really thought of before as being, a competition or so competitive at one point in time. But from what I'm hearing from you, it's almost like, hey, I'm the woman in this crew,
Yep.
And
yeah,
there's no room for you.
Yes.
Pride at work again, right?
You do see it amongst the apprentices, the male apprentices. So if you both have like a 4th year apprentice, like if there's 2 on the site, you see a bit of competitiveness even with them, right? Like they're kind of trying to be the better one. So I have seen it. I think it is kind of a natural thing, but I really see how women are just supporting each other,
Yeah.
And it's wonderful.
That's fantastic. So I want to switch gears a little bit here, and I want to talk about what you're clearly also passionate about, which is your art, your metal art. And, I've seen this now. I've seen it from you, and there's a couple of other people out there that are doing it as well. And I don't remember a time before like a year or 2 years ago that I ever consciously, noticed this type of metal art. So can you explain that a little bit, like what it is that you do and what you love so much about it?
Okay, so I take scrap metal and make it into art. And it usually determines, like, either I get a request from someone, that's starting to happen now, but before it was kind of like whatever I found or got given, I would kind of look at it and say, okay, what can I make out of it? But now I'm getting actual requests. Can you make this or can you make that? So that's what I do. I've always been artistic. I went to high school and I was in the visual arts program. So I always kind of was a little creative. And then recently it's kind of come up again, and it's a real passion, and it's something that gives me peace. So I can honestly say when I'm in my shop and I'm making something, I'm not thinking about anything. So I'm creating from no mind almost. And I've been told from anyone who meditates, that's what it's like. So it's almost a form of meditation, I guess, what I get from it. And of course, it's such a compliment when people want me to make something and they display it in their house or their garden. And yeah, it's like my dream come true,
That's awesome. And I absolutely love that because yeah, there's a lot to be said, about how fast paced the world is right now, and all the different information, like trying to drink from a fire hose, you know what I mean? And to be able to find that thing that shuts your brain off, I mean, that's invaluable. And I think I would venture to say that that's something that a lot of people are going to be looking for, in the future, because I can't imagine that the information that's out there right now is going to slow down. And it's a lot for us to process, right? I mean, it's tough, I mean, you can't pick up your phone, you can't look at the computer without, being bombarded with 18 different pieces of information, and, and you're expected to process it all at once. So having that outlet, whether it's traditional meditation or, immersing yourself in a passion like your metal art, I think that that's incredibly valuable. And it's just amazing to me that, it's kind of a skilled trade is what led to it. You were able to kind of combine two passions there, and suddenly you found the off switch to your brain.
Yes, it's very cool. And then again, I have dreams around that. Like maybe I can get an art show or show in a gallery, or, maybe I can do bigger art installations for like apartment complexes or just whatever. Like the sky's the limit, right? But yes, you're right. But I do have the skills that I learned from my trade, and now I put that into my art. So yeah.
That's fantastic. No, and that just, it highlights all the different benefits that can come from learning this type of skill. I mean, you don't know where it's going to lead. I remember when I joined my dad in fixing the restaurant equipment, kitchen equipment, and stuff like that. I had no idea. I mean, I was always entrepreneurial at heart, and I knew I wanted to own my own business and stuff like that, but never in a million years did I picture myself owning, a commercial service company, and that would be my, my ticket to entrepreneurship. It just, there's nothing glamorous about that, because we were never shown, we were never taught. I never knew what type of opportunity was in this business, but man, looking back, it's like, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's unbelievable. Before I did this, I was a stuntman in California, like walking the red carpets and the glitz and the glamour and stuff like that. And, suddenly I walk into a restaurant kitchen wearing an old greasy uniform. Like, what's glamorous about this? You know what I mean? Well, fast forward 12 years later, it's unbelievable. I'm able to support my family. I'm able to support 50 families, with my business, and able to put out messages like this and help everybody else with with their decisions about their life and their career, and kind of the same with you, helping the apprentices and things like that. It's just, sorry, sometimes I go down on these tangents, but it really is just rewarding. And the battle, I think, is getting people to see how rewarding it can be, because there's just so many different ways, and we're not taught, right?
Right. And it's interesting you said there's so many different ways. So I had this interesting conversation maybe a year ago I went into head office, and one of our purchasers said, "Hey, Courtney, I want you to meet Steffi. She's in our office now, and I think she's in local 46 or was in local 46." And I said, "Okay." So I was at the office and I stopped in to say hello to her, and she sheepishly said, "I'm not in the local anymore. I didn't, it wasn't for me." But she was like almost ashamed that she had to tell me that. And I just looked at her and I said, "Steffi, like, don't worry about it." I go, "You still have value. Just because the trade wasn't for you, that you wanted to work in it, you still have value, and you're still working for a plant, and you still have something to contribute." I go, "You've worked in the trade. So now when someone in the field is on the phone with you and speaking trade jargon and is saying, 'I need this and this,' you understand it. And you're a person in the office who understands it. So that has value. So don't be ashamed,
Yeah.
And that's the goal, like I have with Hayden and her being an ambassador. So everyone's like, "Oh, she has to be a welder." No, she can be whatever the hell she wants. But maybe she's going to be in a position where she's a teacher and a student comes up to her and she recognizes something in that student, and she can say, "Look, maybe the trades are the way to go." Or she has a child of her own, and that child is definitely not going to university. Maybe she go in the trades, right? So that's what it's about. It's just about the education, the awareness, and getting that opportunity out there for people, right? So, because again, me kind of being born into the family I was born into, that's why it worked out for me. But even for me, it wasn't an option at first.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's super interesting, and it's such a great point, I think, that people need to hear. So I'm curious, is your daughter showing interest in the trades and kind of what you do and stuff like that?
absolutely. She absolutely is. She's very hands-on. She likes when we go down to the shop and we make a project together. Like sometimes we have to do with OYAP and Skills Canada, we'll do little projects because everything right now with COVID is online and through Zoom meetings or through some sort of format like video. So we'll do little short videos, and then the kids will now learn about trades through that instead of us being in the classrooms. And she's really engaged in that. But I see another bend to her, and you might like this because you're an entrepreneur. She wants to make money, and she wants to like think of things that she can make to make money. So I like seeing that. She's 7, and that's good that she kind of has a business mind. And that's something I wish I had developed younger, but it seems to just come to me within the last year or so.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. That's really great. And what an opportunity she has just to understand this perspective, because it really, I say a lot that unless you have family in the trades, a lot of times it just falls by the wayside. You're left to rely on the stereotypes in the media and movies and TV shows and things like that as to what it means to be in the trades. You think a plumber is just fixing one toilet after the next, for the rest of their life. You think that a mechanic, it's like a law that they have to have grease all over their face and one strap of their overalls not buckled. And it's just, so oftentimes kids don't get a full grasp or full understanding of, what it all means. So I think that she's got a heck of a leg up, right now, having you to kind of guide her. So that's really great. Do you have just the one daughter?
Yes.
Very cool. Awesome. So where are you at right now? You're focusing on your art, right? Because of COVID and stuff like that. But what else are you doing, and where do you expect to be next year?
So this is interesting. Our union had elections this year, just a few months ago, actually. So we elect, our business manager, our president, vice president, all our business agents. And this year I put my name to run in for executive board. And it was interesting because, it's nerve-wracking to put yourself out there to be judged by your peers. You put yourself in a vulnerable position, and people say things to your face, and you're like, well, I guess the votes are going to really show what they really think of you. And even my mom said, like, we're going to see if 46 is, ready for a woman in a position like this. And you know what? Our local was. And I got elected to that position. It's a non-paying position, but it's, kind of get your foot in the door and get your name out there. And it's a stepping stone into the world of politics within our local. And we'll have to see where that goes. So that position's good for 3 years. And then in the next 3 years, we'll have to see if I want to continue politically and perhaps try for a better position within our local.
Well, congratulations.
Maybe a paid position. Thank you.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah. So that's that. And then of course, I always say, like, I just like to just be in my shop and make art all day. But I do enjoy my job within the union. I like being on the site, and I like being out there with my peers and, working with them every day. And they keep you humble. They tell you when you're being a jerk or so, it's good. It's good.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So Courtney, I've got one more question for you that I love to ask everybody, and I'm excited to ask you. We talked a little bit earlier about success and the definition of success. So I'm curious, what is your overall definition of success?
Oh, wow. To be happy and joyful, but never be content. Yeah. To keep striving for more, because you want to keep striving for more. So if you're not content, that means you're like creative and wanting more, and you're not just content with life. You don't want to be content. You want to keep creating and keep creating your life and your vision. Yeah, that's success.
Yeah. No, that.
Or did you want something more based on the trade?
No, no, that's perfect.
Oh, okay.
No, I like to get people's personal definition of success, because once everybody listens to this episode and they can hear everything that you have to say and how you've worked to get to where you are now and how that's leading toward, because I mean, the second that you said that, happy and joyful but never content, I mean, everything that we've discussed in this podcast, you can see how it's leading you down that path. You know what I mean? Especially when you said the never content. I mean, that aligns right with your artwork. I mean, if that's the last and only thing that you do from here on out, I mean, that fits that definition perfectly. So it's just, I like to make that association on that last question.
Okay, I didn't know if I was supposed to say something trade related, like, what's your definition of success? Well, I don't know. Like, yeah, that's honestly my definition of a success there. Yeah.
Oh, that's
my
fantastic.
life. I don't know what's going to happen in my life, but it's going to be great.
Awesome. What a great attitude to have. So Courtney, why don't you tell people where they can find you? Okay.
So you can find me through Kick-Ass Careers, or you can find me on Instagram at Chard Courtney. I don't know.
Awesome. No, that's perfect. Courtney, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your story with me. I really think it's going to resonate with a lot of our listeners.
I hope so. I know you do these interviews a lot and over, and I hope I brought something different, a different point of view, perhaps.
You absolutely did. You absolutely did. You should see my notes.
Because I'm hoping so, because I'm sure you get a lot of standard answers. So yeah.
Sometimes, but thank you so much for coming on the show. I do really appreciate all you do for the industry and your perspective on everything.